Now that we've added some logic here to get our books from our database and bring them back into our application, let's go ahead and put it to use. Let's go back to our create book component. And now we're going to import our database service. So import database service from, we're going to have to go up a level to get to our services folder, and then we want our database service. Now let's add it to our constructor to make sure it's available on our in our component. So we're going to add private DB service. We're going to set its type to be of database service. And then in our find books down here, we're going to add a this dot db service dot get books dot subscribe, and then we're going to pass in a callback. And this first parameter right here, kind of like when we were using .thens in our response, this is actually the what we're getting back from our service. This is the information we requested from our database. And we're going to call it books. And then we're going to open up this function here, and we're going to add this dot books equals capital B books. So we're going to set the property of inside this component books equal to the information we're getting back from our back end. We're also going to add a this dot books dot reverse. So then not only should that be getting the books, bringing them back in, but it's also going to reverse the order for us that it's going to render on our page. All right, and we're nearly ready to test it out. The last thing we have to do is something else in our app module.ts. So let's open that up again. And let's add an import for the HTTP client module. So right here by my original import for the HTTP client, I'm just going to add HTTP client module. I'm also going to add it to the imports array here. So HTTP client module. I'll save that. And let's go test it out in the browser here. Nice. So now I've got a bunch of books, maybe one real book, that my server is sending back into my Angular application, and it is being passed down here and being rendered. And there we go. There's our books. Let's take a second to think about how exactly we did this. So our back end has a collection of books in it. Our database service.ts is calling out to our database. This is the file and this is the method that actually fires and handles that exchange. And it's being called by our find books component, or I'm sorry, our method here, inside the create book component. It's being stored here in this dot books equals capital B books, which connects to this component's property of books. Then in the create book component, all the way down here at the bottom, we are passing the books to our app display books component in an ng4, where we're just going to iterate over all of the books. So let's try to spruce up our display books at this point. So I'm going to close down these files, and then I'm going to open up my display books.ts file. So in here, I'm going to add a property called ratings. I'm going to set this equal to an array. And then in this array, I'm going to add 5 empty string values. And this is a good time to go and find your favorite emoji star and paste it, or copy and paste it, because we're going to add some star ratings here. So it looks maybe a little bit cooler. So there's 1 star, 2 stars, 3, 4, and 5. Nice. And now we need to do a little bit of conversion while the component is rendering. So we're going to want an on init lifecycle hook and the component as well. Underneath this rating, let's add an ng on init. Oh. And if you get a text snip like this, let's just tear all that out. And then because we're now having ng on init here, we need to make sure that we're telling Angular that our component is going to implement ng on init. So in between our display books component and the opening curly here, I'm going to add implements on capital O N I N I T. And then I'm also going to make sure I'm adding it to my import from Angular core. So now I'm importing both component and on init. So now in here, I'm going to add this dot underscore book, open up a set of square brackets, and in a string, I'll pass in rating. So that is looking at the book that we're actually passing in while we're ng4ing through that array. So while we're iterating, we're taking each individual book, placing it in this display books component, and this is the underscore book that we're talking about right now. So that book's rating equals this dot ratings. So now we're talking about our array of ratings. This dot underscore book. Again, we're going to pass in rating minus 1. So we're going to get the ratings value from our array based off this dot book's ratings value minus 1. So it'll match up to our 0 indexed of ratings. And hopefully, if we wired it all up right and it fires correctly, we will see a collection of stars instead of numbers. So now we've got 1 star, 1 star, 3, 5 stars, 5 stars. Yeah, cool. So now we've added a little bit here to our UI and made it look a little cooler.